Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the newsletter, the podcast for St. John's Lutheran Church, Sand Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the contemporary DPG.
The contemporary DPG. Mm-hmm. Well, I still can't remember. I know it's like director, praise band guy or something like that.
It's director, praise guy. Or contemporary director, praise guy.
Yeah, but either way, it's DPG. It stands before your name. It's the official title of Casey Dreamus.
It almost sounds like I have a PhD or something.
It almost does. It really does.
Like I have something very, official.
Yeah,
I do tell people I do have 2 degrees. One, it's an associate's and a bachelor's, but it's still 2 degrees. So
that's right. It's 2. It counts.
Yeah. So whenever I get people who are like, "Yeah, I have my bachelor's and my master's," I'm like, "Oh, I have 2 too." And then they usually don't like it though when I say it's an associate's and a bachelor's. They're like, "That's not the same thing." I'm like, "Well, I mean, I have 2 pieces of paper. I don't know."
That's right. That's right. You have those special pieces of paper.
That's right.
It's a fantastic piece of paper. Well, guess what, everybody? We're actually going to get to the current event tonight. Yeah. I have decided, and I'll be honest with you. So Casey, you've been so patient with me because I walked in, and so here's what I did. I had my story pulled up, and it was another one of those stories, talking about some mental health research stuff, and it was really interesting. Well, I closed the tab, and the problem is I actually opened up the tab like last week.
Oh, you had it saved.
And so I just kind of had it saved there. And so it's not like if I just went to my history, I could go, oh, well, it was like a week ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so I just didn't have time to do that. So I had to kind of seek out another story. And you've been very patient with me. Oh. So
well, honestly, because we record up in my band's rehearsal space, I don't get up here enough to clean. So I was just cleaning. That was fine with me because I need to clean, and I only come up here for rehearsals and doing the podcast and a lesson I teach. So it gets pretty messy up here.
So I had to seek out a brand new current event story because I knew we were going to get to it tonight. I absolutely knew we were going to get to it tonight, and lo and behold, I actually found one, and it's one that I don't know if we've ever talked about before, but I think we might have. We may have touched upon this. Have we ever talked about the United Methodist Church?
No, I don't think so on the podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So several years ago, and I'm thinking anywhere from 3 to 6 years ago, like a lot of churches, our church included, they have either a triannual or a every 4-year big meeting, with all the churches, the United Methodist Church, and they kind of decide various resolutions. Now, our synod has one as well. We actually had a kind of a special, podcast early on in July with kind of talking a little bit about that for our own synod. Well, the United Methodist Church has one as well, and about 3 to 6 years ago, or whenever this was, and again, I can't remember the exact which one it was, because believe it or not, I barely follow LCMS politics. I definitely don't pay that much attention to other denominations' politics. I just don't.
I've gotten kind of out of the, Lutheran politics. All the slamming against each other. Yeah, I just can't take it anymore.
Bad.
Yeah.
We're rough. We're rough.
And the whole, who sits at the front of the aisle versus who sits in the back aisle.
Oh, that's the worst one. Yeah. But anyway, so several years ago, the United Methodist Church, they had a conference, and one of the big things on their ballot was what to do with things like homosexual marriage. And, for a lot of churches, that is a big deal, kind of like, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? Just for kind of, well, maybe, first of all, to put it as a control, but also to kind of describe where we're at. We believe that homosexuality is a sin. Now, with that, we believe that it is a sin among many sins. So it's not like we're going out here going, well, this is the worst sin. This is there's murder and then homosexuality and then all the others are okay. No. Sin is sin is sin. And so whether you are, looking at vile images on the internet, or whether you are, committing adultery, or whether you are, engaging in homosexual things, they're all kind of on the same. You know, they're sin, and we call it sin. Well, the UMC, the United Methodist Church, had a big debate over what they were going to do with this. And it was really interesting because, you see, the UMC also does evangelism slightly different than the LCMS. See, the LCMS, like let's say we send missionaries to, I don't know, let's say Canada. No, we're not going to because there's a Canadian Lutheran Church. But let's say we send them to Canada, and we do a great job. And all these churches are like, yes, we're Lutherans, we're Christians. We would then say, okay, now set up your own synod kind of thing. And in fact, Canada has their own like Lutheran synod.
Oh, gotcha.
And they're in fellowship with us. And so we're kind of like, okay, well, they do their thing, we do ours. We're in fellowship with one another. Now, if they go off in an odd direction, maybe that fellowship gets broken. But for the time being, we're in fellowship with them. But they're still kind of their own entity. The UMC does not do that. If the UMC goes up to Canada or Africa or Europe or wherever, and they do a great job, they are then become a part of the United Methodist Church.
Right.
So it's all one big church.
One big church, yeah.
Well, you go to a lot of these other countries where Christianity is really booming. I know when we look out on the landscape of America, we rarely think of Christianity as booming, but there are countries in Ethiopia and parts of Africa where it really is, quite frankly, just booming. And in a lot of ways, some of these places make up more. You know, they're having increasing influence because there is a lot more of them. As we see Christianity in our own culture kind of decline a little bit, they're seeing it boom.
Yeah.
And so they're beginning to have more and more influence, and they have a tendency to be a lot more conservative.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is really interesting. Well, when this debate came up, of course, those churches across the pond, if you will, and in other countries also were represented. And so while if you were just to take the vote from an American standpoint, homosexuality would be widely accepted in the UMC, it wasn't. Because
in America, or you mean as
if we just
because
took,
of the whole?
What I'm saying is, if we just took the vote in America,
Oh yeah,
it would have passed with flying colors.
but it wasn't because of all the other.
But it wasn't because all of those other church bodies and all those other countries were actually represented, and so it didn't pass.
Right.
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to amend something known as the Book of Discipline. And I don't quite know, I've not read that book or anything else, but they're basically trying to amend that book to basically get rid of the thing that bans, homosexual unions. And so that's what's happened. And it's now happened twice. And
like they've done 2 votes on it.
And it's failed twice. And so the conservatives have kind of won. Well, the American churches, they've started to just ignore those parts of their own confession. And as a result, the conservative churches have basically kind of put their foot down, and they kind of said, look, either follow the book or don't. But if the major UMC isn't going to basically come down on these churches, we're out.
Yeah.
And so they've basically said, we're not going to enforce this rule. And so a lot of the churches are out. And in fact, just today, 51 UMC churches left the UMC in Illinois.
In Illinois?
In Illinois.
Wow.
Just in Illinois.
That's pretty incredible.
And like just a few days ago, like 70 of them like left in Florida.
Is that as in people who are leaving it because they don't agree with accepting that, or they're
more
leaving
conservative?
because
They're
okay,
more
they're the conservative one. I didn't know if they were the liberal ones are leaving because now they're changing.
I know it gets a little confusing, doesn't it? But
you would think that would be the way it would be. Like, okay, well, we want to accept this, so we're just going to break off and become like non-denominational or whatever we want to call ourselves.
Yeah,
but that's very interesting.
Now, what was really interesting though is right before they had this big conference, they did something that was odd, and in my opinion, still is odd. They actually voted to simplify the process to leave the church, to leave the UMC. And they did that because they knew the schism was coming.
Yeah.
And because they knew it was coming, they wanted to make it easier for the churches that wanted to leave to leave.
That's interesting because how how hard is it really to leave?
It depends.
Because I would think, I don't know who. If you ask the question, who owns the church? God, of course. But but for legal reasons, if something happened where that building was vacant, who isn't there somebody or?
Well, okay. So here's kind of a thing. And I'll be honest, I'd have to reread our own constitution.
Right.
So I don't know if this is in our constitution, but so our church has a constitution, and it has a status of rules and laws and bylaws. It's how we delve up our committees and all that kind of stuff in church. It's how our governance structure works. A lot of churches will have this thing, and it is one of the first ones, and it basically says if this church were to ever split, the building would go to those that hold to the LCMS.
Yes.
So it just makes that split, and it makes it clear that if you let's say you got 30 people that stay in the LCMS and 70 people that leave, you would think the majority wins. The 70 people get the building.
But
that's not so according to the Constitution.
Gotcha.
You'd actually have to change the Constitution first before you could do that. And what the UMC is doing is it's simplifying that process so that they can have an easier time leaving.
Okay, gotcha. So maybe that would mean the majority gets the building,
or however they did it. I don't actually know the UMC process. So
does the building technically belong to, or is there a deal with the state? Or I should finish my first thought. Does it belong to the overall kind of governing synod? Or is it something to where, if the church just kind of went under, it would go to, the city property?
The people own the... Okay, I should clarify. It depends on what your church body is.
Okay.
So, for instance, the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church owns the building.
Okay.
So that's why the Catholic Church can make decisions.
Yeah.
A Catholic Church, from the way I understand it, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm some expert on the Catholics, but from what I understand it, if the Catholic diocese said, well, we just don't want that congregation to be open anymore, that congregation is closed.
Interesting.
It doesn't just get to keep going. At least I don't think. Now, again, maybe they can argue their case or whatever. But with us... our synod is no, the people of the church own the property. Now, we are part of a synod. We are part of the Central Illinois District, which is a part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And so, we have all of those things as well. But the building itself does not belong to synod.
Okay. Gotcha.
We as a church, as a people, are a part of the synod. Mm-hmm. So the church still belongs to the people.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. That's very interesting, especially when people want to start changing, they want to change something very big or very controversial. Because I think it's always interesting when you start getting into the discussion of who's accepting, because it always seems like my generation and the generations younger than me seem to always think that America is the absolute worst as far as any sort of being accepting or anything like that. And you ask anybody who, I've met a lot of people from other countries and people who, stayed in other places. And there's a lot of very, very conservative countries out there that do not, that is completely against. And just from things I've seen, with different TV shows or movies that have come out, there are certain ones that, they get praised for they had their first, lesbian character and, whatever in this movie or this franchise. And everybody's really happy. Well, that's only in America because they cut that part out everywhere else. Because China, absolutely not. They don't do any of that. There's no small, you can't even indicate it. So they cut all those little lines. They change the lines around a little bit. They cut out any sort of scene that they need to cut out. And it goes to China, and no one from China would ever know that character was supposed to be gay or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. I always, I feel like that was a very big discussion, especially when I was in high school, of just people being accepting and all this stuff. And, a lot of people with strong words to say about how horrible this, Illinois or this area or this country is. And then, but then you hear about other places, and they're not they're not even like playing with it. It's not.
Well,
it's
you
not
know, and I mean,
happening.
I'll be honest. Like we had a conversation in my confirmation class this last week.
Yeah.
You know, because one of the things that you know, and I forget exactly how it all came up, but like one of the things that we were talking about was like Christian persecution.
Yeah.
And you could just tell, like in the kids' minds, they were like, "Well, that just doesn't happen anymore." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it does. It does happen." And I talked about the noon. Do you remember when ISIS first became big? They went around their country, and I forget which country it was, and they sprayed a noon on all the Christians' homes, and it stood for Nazareth.
Oh.
They followed Jesus of Nazareth, and so they put like an inn in essence, an Arabic inn on their home, and it basically was like get out or die.
Yeah.
You know, it was like we will kill you. Here's your sign: leave or die.
Yeah.
And you know, and again, coming back to China, like you know, China doesn't like the Christian church over there. It just doesn't. And it's like one of their big mega churches, and this was probably 5 years ago too, but they, you know, and again, they basically found a tax loophole or some form of like minor thing that they had done wrong. And it was something that everybody else, I guarantee you, probably does wrong on a daily basis. Well, they found it, and so they literally showed up with wrecking crews, just destroyed the whole building.
Oh, geez.
Like their whole church.
Yeah.
Like that's China. China says we don't like you. They found something to get rid of them. They got rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, yeah, like being Christian over in China would be very hard.
Yes.
It's not illegal, but it's definitely frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you hear of that more and more in a lot of places. And quite frankly, you know, we're starting to see some of that in America, but we don't really see that in America.
Yeah. No.
You know, we're seeing some of the views that Christians have becoming more countercultural.
Yeah.
But we don't see it like the illegality of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting because with social media, there's a lot of people online with big followings who will just, you know, say how horrible Christians are and how it's so awful. But, you know, but then you drive past, you know, you drive on a Sunday and you see churches all over the place. I mean, there's tons of churches everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're all, not all of them, but they're full. You know, there's a lot of them with lots of cars in them. And so it's not as, you know, they kind of act like it's this little tiny group of people who are just awful and, you know, and like this little pest. And it's like, no, there's still a lot of people who believe in this, you know, who are followers. And they
well, you know, and I always talk about this sometimes. Well, I shouldn't say. Did you see how I phrased that? I always talk about this sometimes.
Yeah, you always talk about this sometimes.
I always talk. 60% of the time it works every time.
I rarely talk about this all the time.
Yeah. But I talk about this on occasion. You know, Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew that, you know, when the Son of Man returns, like if he would not have returned, nobody would be saved. And the implication that I've always gotten from that reading, that text, is that when Jesus returns, it's going to be very sparse. The Christian church is going to be very sparse. Not a lot of us left. And that's the implication that I've always kind of got. Now, if you take that into effect and you say, okay, well, what are we looking at then here? What are we looking at for the Christian church? Well, you know, the LCMS has somewhere around 1.6 to 2 million people. So that's not tiny. We're not the biggest Lutheran church in America. In fact, the biggest Lutheran church in America is the ELCA. And I know that, you know, the ELCA is very, very liberal. And a lot of us, myself included, don't really consider them Lutheran anymore. They've kind of abandoned a lot of, if not, well, I don't want to say all, but a lot of Lutheran principles. But they have like 10 million people. Like the biggest non-Catholic church has like something like 20 to 30 like million people. I think it's like 20 million.
Yeah.
And then I always ask people like, well, how many people do you think the Catholic Church has? You know, they're the biggest.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, they're the biggest in America. What do you think that they have? And like, you know, you get guesses all over the place. Depending on which report you have, they have anywhere from 35 to 53 million.
Oh, wow.
So they are not just the biggest. They are the biggest by a margin.
Yeah.
By a huge margin. And then you go, okay, well, let's expand this out worldwide. And it's like, okay, well, you know, there's something like 400 million Greek Orthodox across the globe. But, all things considered, you go, okay, well, how many Christians are there? Well, the Catholic Church is not just big in the United States. It's actually big all over the world. Yeah. And it clocks in at something like 1.2 billion people.
Sheesh.
Now, I always say that because you're looking at right around 2 billion people are Christians. Now, I always tell people that's obviously not accurate. For one, you have some places where the entire country is just Catholic. It's not that the people themselves are actually Catholic. It's just the country's Catholic, and therefore they're Catholic by default. And those are all calculated in the numbers. But then I say to people, what if just 50% of that was true?
Mm-hmm.
50%. That's still a billion people.
Yeah.
And let's just say we're down to 25%. Only 25% of the people that claim that they're Christian are actually Christian. You're still at close to 500 million people.
Yeah.
That's not exactly what I would say if the Son of Man had not come. Nobody would be saved. That's still a lot of people. That's more people than we have in the entirety of America.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of people. Christianity, and that the other part of that too is also that we say, oh, and I'm kind of getting off track a little bit, but that's okay. It's kind of like in America, we sometimes look at ourselves as the center point.
Yeah.
And so when we see certain aspects of Christianity dwindling around us, we kind of just assume that that's everywhere.
Yeah.
And that is in certain European countries for sure. That is in America for sure. But it's not everywhere. And like I said, in Ethiopia, Ethiopia is like a big one. And this was this is about 6 years ago, we declared fellowship with an Ethiopian church that had 6 million people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
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 That's crazy. Well, and I know at least, because I'm doing music and everything, like Australia, Hillsong churches opened up there. And I mean, massive amounts of people. I don't know what the numbers are, but I just know, they're their churches are like stadiums. It's insane. But yeah, there are people, out there. There are places where it's thriving, or
Yeah, but again, it's just one of those things that you got to kind of put it into perspective, and it's like, I don't want to say that we don't see certain things happening around us or in the United States. We do, absolutely, and quite frankly, as human beings, we should certainly start looking for solutions to those problems. And maybe we don't find one, but we got to try.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like that's completely different than saying Christianity is going downhill all over the world. Well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. So anyway, but it is interesting, kind of tying it in, looking at governance structures, looking at the UMC, and how this all works, how our synod works. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's my current event story.
Yeah.
There you go, my current event.
I'm glad you brought that because I wouldn't have known that was happening, honestly, at this time. So it's very interesting to hear about.
Yeah.
Well, I was, as far as a question goes.
Yeah.
Because it's with the holidays. I thought this might be a good time to ask. And maybe this is a little broad, but just I wanted to maybe go over, or at least ask, what exactly Advent entails. Because we have these Wednesday Advent services.
Okay.
And some churches don't. I mean, the church I grew up in, we always did the candles. We always did. I mean, we had Advent. It wasn't, but we didn't do like a specific service on Wednesdays for it. It was just on Sundays. We just kind of, leading up to Christmas sort of thing. So I didn't know, maybe that's too broad, or maybe that's too
well, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do here. So first of all, just so you know, the word Advent comes from a Latin phrase. The Latin term is advenio, and it means coming. And the whole point, so a lot of times we get things in America quite a bit backwards. And I'm not just talking about materialism. Like, I know a lot of us are like, yeah, we shouldn't buy stuff for Christmas. Like, well, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about the whole season of Advent. Mm-hmm. The whole season of Advent is about preparing yourself for the coming of the Lord. We know that Jesus ascended into heaven. He preached to the disciples, he rose from the dead, and then he ascended into heaven. And basically, we were told that there's going to be a time when he descends, when he comes back. We sometimes call it the second coming of Christ, right? We're waiting for this time when Jesus will return to collect us, to take us to be with him for all of eternity. We are waiting for that moment, that time. Mm-hmm. And while we wait, there is a point in time where we prepare for that. And so the word advenio means coming, and it's all about the fact that Jesus is going to come. And so we have to ask that question. What are we going to do to prepare for the coming of our Lord? And so if you haven't noticed, like, you'll notice I didn't say anything about Christmas, right? Right. Christmas isn't even a dot on my radar yet. Like, this is all about the fact that the Lord is coming and I need to prepare myself. What do you do when you prepare for yourself for, like, when company's coming over, right? You clean house, you get things ready. What do you do to yourself and for yourself whenever your Lord is coming? Well, if you remember the parable of the 10 virgins, which we just had a couple weeks ago, right? You make sure you have enough oil. You make sure you trim your wicks. And in our own lives, we look in and start to evaluate our lives, and we say, okay, what are some things that maybe aren't the best habits? What are some things that we can kind of get rid of, and all that kind of stuff? And like, that's the whole point of Advent. Advent is all about preparing yourself for the coming of the Lord. Now, again, liturgically, from a color standpoint, in the last 100 years or so, it's been switched over to blue. And blue is fine. It's a good color. We don't get to use blue very much, so I kind of like the blue. Yeah. That being said, traditionally, if I was a traditionalist, it would be violet. And violet is that color of preparation. It is that color of of trying to get yourself ready. It is just that what's that word I'm trying to think of? The word the violet. It is there basically for that moment, that time when you're trying to kind of get ready by self-reflection, by prayer. A lot of times we do this in Lent, right? Lent's color is violet as well. And what do? You like, people fast and stuff like that. And fasting kind of gets a bad rap, and it gets a bad rap sometimes for good reasons. But actually, fasting is not a bad thing. Remember, Jesus didn't say, don't fast anymore. In fact, Jesus said the exact opposite. He said, hey, when you fast, this is how I want you to do it. Mm-hmm. And so the implication was that you were always gonna fast. And so the season of Advent was actually that idea of self-reflection. Maybe you add a fast in there. Maybe you find a way to do something, to work on yourself, to prepare for yourself.
So would it be safe to say that maybe this is a little backwards in the idea of we kind of do this sort of thing when it comes to New Year's? Like, New Year's resolution, I'm going to start trying to do this better. Or I'm going to start doing. Is that sort of the idea? Like, here's some things I know I need to get better at, and I need to start working on that. But
look at it more spiritually.
Right. Well, I'm not saying like, I need to stop eating so many carbs.
And again, that's not. You're right, because I think that's absolutely correct. But I mean, I look at it like this, because there are some people that say, well, I'm going to fast because I need to be healthier with what I eat, and that's all well and good. But a diet plan is something that you're supposed to never stop.
Yeah.
Fasting, you'll have a time of fasting and then a time of celebration and joy and eating. Yeah. And so fasting is different than dieting. And so I always tell people, if you want to start a diet plan, but that's not fasting. Fasting is taking something out that you're eventually going to put back in.
Yeah. And you don't start a dieting plan. You start a lifestyle.
Okay. You start a lifestyle.
But yeah. So I mean, as a spiritual sort of way. See, now that is interesting, because it's always been like a very exciting time.
Yeah.
Christ is coming. This is, it was very exciting. Never have I, and maybe it's because I was younger and in high school and stuff, and maybe, and I mean, I'm not great at listening at this point in my life, let alone when I was 17 years old. So, but I've just never really had it presented in that way, to my knowledge, that it's like this is the time to kind of clean up our spiritual life and make sure that we're ready for Christ coming. So that's interesting.
It's a penitential season. That was the word I was looking for earlier. It is penitential. Like we're supposed to be more self-reflective and prayerful during this time. And it's again, we're going to meet the Lord with joy. So we're not thinking that ahead is an awful time. Like, no, it's we're preparing ourselves because we know that this great joy is coming and this great moment is coming. Now, not at the halfway point, but just past the halfway point. And I always like to tell people, I always like to say it like this. I always you know how Thursday is? You got a work week, Monday through Friday, and you get to Thursday, and it's like, Thursday is kind of a good day.
Thursdays were my favorite days.
Thursday, it's not Friday. It's not Friday. It's not the weekend yet. You still got a whole other day of work. But you're past that midpoint. You're on the downward slope. Mm-hmm. The ancients understood this as well. And so they'd have a moment of rejoicing. And I always love this because it is actually reflected in our candles and our colors, all of it. That's why you have the candles that are like 3 blue or 3 violet and then 1 pink.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. And actually, this is why the violet actually makes a lot of sense and the blue doesn't. Because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take out what they're known as the penitential colors. And the penitential colors are black and blue. And so if you take a violet candle and you take out black and blue, you get like a rose colored.
Ah, yeah.
And so that's where the rose comes from, is the fact that they pull out the black and the blue and they leave that like little bit of joy. It's still penitential, right? It's not quite white right, where you have that like pure kind of thing. It's not that. It's not the Christ candle, but it's just kind of like that hiccup of joy. And so on week 3, so you have 4 weeks. So on week 3, you have what they call the rejoice, or I think in Latin is gaudet or something like that. And then after that, then you go back to the violet, for the last week, because you're like, yeah, it's still going,
Right.
Kind of like that Friday workday, right? It's the best. Like, But yeah, so I mean, like that's kind of the whole color scheme and all that. But again, the beauty of this is that like then it all comes together on Christmas Day. Mm-hmm. And what do you celebrate on Christmas Day except for that our Lord has come? Now does that mean he's descending from on high with the clouds? Well, we might wish for that, and maybe this year that's what we'll get for Christmas. But if this year follows the pattern that other years had, we'll get to Christmas and we will celebrate the birth of the child Jesus. And that's a celebration of all the prophecies that were fulfilled, of all the times when God said, I'm going to come, I'm going to show up, I'm going to come. And then all of a sudden, there he is. Mm-hmm. And see, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're looking at the prophecy saying, he says he's going to return. He's going to come back. He's going to come with the clouds. He's going to descend from on high. And so we're kind of, on Christmas Day, you're kind of doing a both and. You're saying, see, he does do what he says he's going to do. He does fulfill his words. Mm-hmm. So the words that we were talking about earlier are also true. That Jesus, that God said that he was going to send his son. Boom, he sent his son. Jesus said, I will return. We know that it's happening. We know that it's going to happen one day. But Christmas becomes that very climactic, like here it is.
Yeah.
And then after that, you have the holiday of Christmas. Yes. And you get 12 days of Christmas.
You know what? My wife was telling me about their school is doing like a 12 days of Christmas thing where it's like the first day they're giving like all the teachers. It's a fun little thing. But they're giving all the teachers like the first day they said, hey, you guys can wear jeans for the rest of this like the month, like and so each day is like a gift, like a little thing, like for fun. And of course, I only know this because I started working here, and we had this conversation like many moons ago, and that I said, well, that's technically not the 12 days of Christmas, that,
that's right.
And I got, of course, to my wife, I said it in a very sarcastic, like,
oh yeah, sure,
like, don't these people know, these heathens know anything about Christmas? That's not the 12 days of Christmas. And because it starts on Christmas and it's 12 days after throughout that. Yeah. Right?
Now here's your fun history day. Do you know why? I can't remember in our own discussions in previous. Did I ever tell you why?
I don't know. I don't think I know why.
Okay.
Maybe you probably said it, I'm sure.
Okay.
But
This is always my fun little tidbit of history. I think this is hilarious. So, and I don't know exactly when it took place, but at some point in time in history, they decided to switch from what's known as the Julian calendar system to a Gregorian calendar system.
Oh, yes. I'm a fan of both. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Western church kind of adopted the Gregorian style, the new style. The Eastern church wanted to stay in the Julian style. And because of that, but because of the different ways that the two calendars track time, you ended up with actually 12 days that are kind of distorted.
Okay. Yeah.
And so if you were to go to a Greek Orthodox church, guess what? Christmas is January 6th. Exactly 12 days after December 25th.
Interesting.
And so that's that, but that's why, because they switched the calendars. Now here's a little bit more interesting. So a lot of people will say, well, you know, the Christmas is celebrated on December 25th. It's a winter solstice. It's this, it's that, it's whatever. No, the way, here's how they got the date for Christmas. And don't look, I'm not going to sit here and argue that it's completely 100% accurate. I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, Jesus obviously was born on December 25th. I'm not going to say that at all. What I am going to say, though, is that it is really interesting. So in the ancient church, like early church, they had this kind of belief. And the basic element of the belief is that prophets, people of a significant prominence, like in Scripture, they died on the same day they were conceived. Yeah.
Conceived?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. Because life begins at conception.
Oh, well, okay. Yes.
Right.
I don't have an argument with that. I'm just, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's, I know that sounds like that's weird. And you're right. Well, we're not living back then.
Yeah.
So that probably is weird to us. But so, if you look at that, we know that whenever Jesus died, according to some calendars, especially on the Gregorian calendar, it would have happened, you know, and they have it all plotted. I think it's like supposed to be on the year 27, but it would have been on the 14th day after Nisan, which is a moon cycle, which in the year 27 or something like that, whenever they think it was, or whenever they thought it was, even back then, it would have been on March 25th. Now, if you look at our church calendars and when we celebrate things, and you went back to March 25th, you know what you'd find? The celebration of the Annunciation. The angel announcing to Mary that she's pregnant and with child.
Ah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. And so that, you know, add 9 months to March 25th, because you know what? The ancients could count too.
Yeah, right.
And so if you add 9 months to that, you'll get December 25th.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So when people start doing the whole, like, you know, he wasn't born on.
Yeah.
Is it because of that number, the March number?
Yeah.
That they're like, technically he's probably born in like March, but that's actually when he was conceived?
Well, again, according, if you were following all the ancient traditions, you would say, okay, well, he died on the same day that he was conceived. He died on the cross, you know, so, you know, Good Friday was on like March 25th. And so that's when the Annunciation was. So therefore, you know, and it kind of all goes, you know, again, all these things are kind of like interconnected. But again, you got the Gregorian and Julian calendars at play.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that you'll notice is if you do the 14th after Nisan and all that kind of stuff, and you go, okay, let's say Easter this year, or Good Friday, I should say, fell on March 25th. Guess what? In the Eastern churches, it's going to fall on April 6th.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
12 days.
Yeah.
In a 12-day gap.
12-day gap. That's so. What's the? I don't know what you can call it. What is the? Or did you say we're on the Gregorian?
Yeah, I think so.
System. Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. And I'm sorry, just because this is stuck in my head, is that there is a style of singing called Gregorian chant.
Yep.
And now I'm like, is there a style called Julian chant? I just really want to know. So I'll have to look that up later and see. But that's very interesting. Wow, see, that's a.
But yeah, oh yeah, you got all these kind of tidbits like thrown in there. So So yeah, the celebration of Christmas for December 25th has everything to do with Easter and when we celebrate Easter, and it has nothing to do with the winter solstice. So
Interesting. Okay.
and the 12 days of Christmas come from basically from a calendar flaw.
Oh, interesting. That's wow. That's quite interesting. And and it's developed one of the most annoying songs to most people in the world. So.
Which, by the way, if I remember correctly, was a catechetical song.
Really?
It was meant to like teach and teach the catechism in a memorable way. Not the Lutheran catechism, the Catholic catechism.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So I believe each of those parts of that song actually fit in with some criteria for the Catholic Church.
Interesting. Now, I saw someone the other day who posted about that song, and they're just like, how many birds are they going to give this person? And they're talking about how it's like, the partridge and, the, ducks or whatever. And then someone commented that they're actually all birds, that the 5 golden rings are actually referring to a certain type of bird that was called a something ring.
Yeah.
Or gold ring or something. And so, the drummers referred to a certain type of bird. And so apparently, I don't know if that's a 100% fact. Of course, I just saw it on the internet, so I assume it's true. But apparently, all of them are referring to an actual bird in some way.
So there's a lot of birds there.
Yeah, so they're like,
That's
technically they're all birds.
I'm hearing a lot of birds.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'll have to look that up and make sure that's actually true, but we'll see.
Yeah.
If I remember and if anybody really, if it's really that important to anyone.
But yeah. Now I also say this now because we're getting into that season, and we're talking about Advent. Tomorrow is actually a special day as well.
Yes.
Now, for those of you that are listening to this right now, if you have kids nearby, pause this, or make them leave the room, or something like that.
Top secret.
Okay, you've been warned. And 3, 2, 1. Tomorrow is St. Nick's Day.
Yes.
St. Nicholas was actually a saint. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea of Santa Claus that we've developed over the years is actually developed over a man by the name of St. Nicholas Myra. Mm-hmm. M-Y-R-A.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about this last time.
We did.
Because
his bones are in Barry.
Because his bones are in Barry.
And I wrote a song called Santa Played the Barry, meaning Barry saxophone, not understanding that was actually very clever.
Yeah. Super clever on your
Very
end.
clever, which I found out like 12 years later that was clever.
That was clever. But anyway, so St. Nicholas of Myra, he is the one that's celebrated. Now, you celebrate a saint on the day that they died. So December 6th is the day he was died. And over the years, the tradition came, and look, everybody, some of this is just downright legend. I mean, I do not believe that this all happened exactly the way it put. But I think the point of it is still the same, that he was a generous man. Mm-hmm. And the way it worked was this. According to legend, and there's a few different stories out there, and you can stumble on them, but he was walking down the streets one night, and there were these 2 daughters, and I believe that they were in a very, very poor home. They wanted to get married. They couldn't get married because they couldn't afford it. And on top of that, from what I understand, they very well may have been sold into prostitution or something of the like if they didn't find a way out of this. And if tradition holds, St. Nicholas took 2 bags of money and he threw them, and they went straight through the chimney, and they somehow magically bounced, and they landed in the socks that were hanging by the mantelpiece. And thus was born the tradition of stockings.
Yes.
And getting gifts in your stockings. And so that's the tradition, right? Now, how did it really happen? I don't know.
It's like
did it even happen?
It's like the JFK magic bullet. It's like,
right?
That's like
like, how did this happen?
Pretty interesting, yeah.
So again, this is the legend. This is the tradition. Fascinating reading. Again, you can look it up and look up some of the other stories. But this is kind of the bare bones of the tradition. And so what happened is, over the years, it became traditional to hang up your stockings by your fireplace, and then you would hope that St. Nick would throw something down the chimney and it would land in your stocking. As you can imagine, the traditions have expanded over the years.
Yeah, a little bit.
In a lot of wild, wild ways, for sure. However, if you want to be a traditionalist, and quite frankly, I don't know. I hope you are. I don't know. I think it's fun. But what you do is kids are allowed to open up their stockings on December 6th because it's St. Nick's Day.
Right.
And so on December 6th, on St. Nick's Day, you check to see what Santa left in your stockings.
Interesting. Yeah.
And there are still, by the way, there are still a lot of people that do this. And I do think it's fun. I really, really do. But that's where our Santa Claus comes from, our St. Nick comes from, and all this stuff. And I always say, Santa Claus is fun because he leapt over the table and decked Arius. So
yeah,
anyway,
right.
Let's see. Did we talk about that last?
I think we did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of fun stories there. But yeah, so tomorrow is St. Nick's Day. So if you don't have your stockings up, hang your stockings. You better get your stuff and get them in the stockings because St. Nick is coming.
Yeah.
And he's coming to throw either punches or toys, one of the two.
Now that is there any other? I don't want to cut you off if you have more stuff.
Oh no!
But
I wanted to go there.
This is I'm not going to say this is a great film, but there was for a couple years my band, we would have like a Christmas party, of course, but we would watch this movie called Santa Slays, and it stars the wrestler Goldberg as Santa Claus, and the whole premise is that Santa Claus has actually been cursed for the last 2,000 years or however long, whatever it is, and that he can't hurt anybody, and he actually has to bring presents to kids every Christmas. But that time has come where now he can finally do what he really wants to do, and that's murder everybody. So
this is called Santa Slays.
It's called Santa Slays
with Goldberg in it.
It's Goldberg, and the great part is that they wanted to have these really crazy, reindeer who were this horror, but they couldn't afford that, so they just made one giant bison. So Santa has a sleigh with one big bison in the front of it, and that's how he gets around. It's a really stupid movie, but it's kind of if you're into those type of sort of slasher. Yeah, I mean it's hilarious because it's just so over the top and ridiculous. So and we talked about this a couple weeks ago too. There are some ancient traditions or whatever that kind of Christians kind of stole and adapted and all that kind of stuff. And I will be honest, one of them has to do with Odin. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Odin. And I've watched enough Marvel movies to know who Odin is. Yeah.
But anyway, so Odin in the mythologies was this god.
Thor's dad, right? Father?
I think this is a different Odin.
Oh, shoot.
I could be wrong.
Well, if you watch Marvel Avengers.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're doing.
Odin's Thor's father. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
But he flies around in a sleigh carried along by his flying spider.
Oh, wow. That's scary.
Yeah, it's horrifying. And when Odin would land on your rooftop, you could hear the 8 feet of the spider tap it on your roof.
Gosh, that is. I do not like to think of that. Yeah.
And so again, when you're saying do I think Christians possibly took that tradition and adopted it and adapted it for Santa Claus? Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah, a little bit,
quite possibly, and quite frankly, I am glad. I am so thankful that we don't talk about spiders flying.
Yes, no, it's
giant flying spiders carrying a sleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I'm good with Santa. Bring on the big red suit and the fat man.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, hopefully. Now that should be. I don't know. Maybe we don't have enough time for that. But would you say doing the Santa thing? Because I mean I know people who are like, we do not do Santa in our house because they feel like it's sacrilegious to do that. Do you feel like it's sacrilegious to do it, or is it
no?
Okay.
I think it's fun. I think, I think as long as you keep it straight and keep it fun and keep it for what it is. Now, I will say that I like some practices over others, but at the same time, like I'm not, like you do Santa in your house how you want to do it, but I do like the idea of keeping the stockings Santas.
Yeah.
And making it something small and like, and then I personally think like your bigger gifts should come from your parents and your family and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But again, these are my personal thoughts. These are not, these are not written in stone anywhere. I think this is just kind of helpful things. I know some people that are really anti-Santa, and part of it comes down to the fact that they feel like they're lying to their children. Yeah. And they feel like later, they'll say, "Oh, you lied to me about that. What else have you been lying to me about?"
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I get that. I don't honestly think that's big of a concern. I mean, we don't fear that with the tooth fairy or any other things. What? Oh, good Lord, I hope there's no kids listening to this.
Do you? Well, we warned.
We did. I gave them a good warning.
Yeah. This is on you if you're playing this for your kids and they don't know yet. But do you have, because I assume both of your kids no longer believe in Santa Claus.
That is correct.
Is there any story as how they found out?
No.
They just kind of.
Yeah, they kind of figured it out. But again, I will also say though, like I've always done it with the stockings and like the smaller things. Like Santa always brought some gifts, like other things, but
I'll say my kids are still young enough that they're totally into it. So
for sure.
My little sister, there was one year, she's about 12 or 13 years younger than me. I can't remember exactly, but she there was one Christmas where we came downstairs and it was like we had the stockings, did the whole thing, and then I don't know, like we opened presents, and then about 5 minutes later she comes in and she had dug through the garbage can and found the bags of like Christmas candy, empty bags that were in the stockings. Oh, and she came in and just goes, "What's this?" It was because she was at the point where it's like she's pretty much she's figuring out, she knows
yeah,
but it was so funny because it's like my mom said that I buried that at the bottom on purpose. So she dug through the trash all the way down to the bottom to get that out. So that was kind of funny. But I was just, some people have like real traumatic, stories of when they found out. I just had some cousins who were like a couple years older than me, and they just were like, there's no Santa, right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, that was when I was like, oh, I guess there's not.
Yeah.
I didn't know, So
yeah, I feel like some of my older it might have been my sister, but I also have cousins that are older, so I can't remember. It wasn't real traumatic for me by all means. So obviously, if I can't even really remember it,
So well, you think it's
what
time?
What time is it?
We're actually, this is like we're getting pretty close to an actual standard episode that we usually did.
Standard episode. Standard.
Yeah.
Oh man! So I guess it's time.
It's time.
It's time for Church Chatter. All right, here we go. Big weekend coming up. Big Sunday coming up. It is. This coming Sunday is so packed. It is so packed. Mm-hmm. We have so much going on. It's actually really awesome. So we have at the 8 o'clock service, we have lessons and carols from the choir. Then at the 10:45 service, we have lessons and carols from the praise band. At around noontime, I think I've invited the youth. I'll have to send another text for that, but the youth group will be meeting probably around noon to 2-ish, maybe, depending. And then starting at 2, a group is going caroling. Mm-hmm. And I saw the list today, and it's pretty awesome. So you guys are going to, there's some great places that people are going to sing. I think it's great. So super exciting. So yeah, like if you want it, you could quite literally spend all day doing church stuff. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow or Sunday. I almost said tomorrow. Sunday. And that's pretty awesome. Of course, you all know, hopefully you know, tomorrow evening is our first midweek service. Now, again, kind of the Advent, in that preparation, some people chose to discipline themselves to focus on an extra service. Now, a lot of times the service could be what's known as catechetical, teaching some of the basics. But a lot of times what it does is it just focuses on that preparation as we gear up for Christmas. And this year, that's kind of what we're doing. We're focusing on and getting ready for like the big celebration of Christmas. Peace Come to Earth is the name of the series. We'll be doing 3 weeks, and the Christmas Day sermon is going to be the conclusion of the series. So look forward to that. I know a lot of people don't think of Christmas Day, but Christmas Day is the big day. And so we have church at 10 a.m. on Christmas Day. But so tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. is our very first midweek service. Now, again, some of you might be listening to this either that day or maybe the day after. Don't worry, you missed one. It's okay. Just come to the next week. Hey, and here's the best part. I shouldn't say this the best part. It's not the best part. But afterwards, and it is a good part, we get to spend some time in fellowship. We have sausage, we have pancakes. And I know the evangelism committee is doing the one after that. I haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do the third week, but we will have something. So we're going to have some time, some fellowship, some time together with food and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be great. So we have a lot to look forward to. December 17th at the 1045, I believe, is the children's program.
Yeah.
So, man, I mean, you want to talk about just a loaded several weeks coming up. There's so much going on. And, yeah, I mean, there's just this. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think there's some other stuff going on, too.
I don't know. I mean,
I never know.
I have to point out that, the sausages this week are from Rabers. Because wonderful family, very nice people. My wife taught one of their daughters.
Yeah.
So they're very, very nice people. But that was I probably said this the other week, but that was the story where I was in line last year and everybody's going, oh man, I think they get these like imported from like this, there's stories of where this sausage
in fairness,
comes from.
I thought it came from Beecham's over in Tremont.
Oh, okay.
And so,
and maybe it did at some point. Probably. Yeah.
I can't. I feel like because Rabers burned down.
It
once.
did, yeah.
And so
crazy.
I think that 1 year it burned. They either came from Beecham's or they came from somewhere else. But then they went back to Rabers, which I like Rabers as well.
Yeah.
They're a great company, great people.
Yeah.
At least from the times I've had together.
Yeah. No, they're awesome. And that's interesting because that happened when my wife was teaching their daughter that the place burned down and rebuilt and everything. And so if you've driven past that building though, it's beautiful, an absolutely beautiful building now. But yeah. We're not getting paid to talk about this, but I just they're just nice people, so I wanted to say something. They're nice people, but again, it just cracked me up so much how people are going, oh, I think it's from like they get this, from out of the country or something, like all these crazy stories, and then someone just goes, they get it from Rabers. I'm like, oh, I know Rabers.
Yeah,
it was very funny.
And I'll be like, oh my goodness, but yeah, no, it's great. I love having the meals after church. I really do. It's just
fun.
I personally, even more than the food, and don't get me wrong, the food is great, but I just love seeing the people. I love seeing people gathered around talking, chatting, all that kind of, it's just great to me. I love it. Especially around the holidays, right? When you're gearing up for Christmas. Just seeing everybody come together is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of all of that. But yeah, so those are some of the things kind of going on at church. And again, we have a lot going on. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, we're gonna have a lot of music this week, so that's really exciting. It's fun to do. We usually do a few songs, but we get to do we're gonna do 10 or something, and with stuff in between, and it's a good time. We do it every year, so
absolutely. So, as we end tonight, because I know we're getting close to the end, I am trying to find right now a news article. I am trying to think. Okay, so here's the thing.
What?
Somebody shared a news article with me about Taylor Swift.
Okay.
and I can't remember. Oh, this is terrible. There was something going on with Taylor Swift, and they shared it with me, and I was like, really? And anyway, I can't find it. I looked up the news articles, and all it is about Kelsey and Taylor and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
There was something else though. It was something. It was something, whatever it was. Oh man. It makes me sad because I had an article. I was like, I'm gonna bring it up. We're gonna talk about Taylor Swift. You know,
I have had several people just kind of start in on a conversation with me about Taylor Swift. It was just crack because they listen to the podcast. It cracks me because like I don't know that much about Taylor Swift, just general stuff. But it's so funny because I saw this thing about Taylor Swift the other day, and I'm like, oh okay.
Yeah, somebody shared an article. I mean, like I look. I'm not going to get into like the celebrity gossip stuff, like with her and Kelsey and all this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, whatever. Like, I mean, I thought it was funny to bring it up when they were first started dating, but like other than that, it's like, whatever.
Yeah,
But again, there was I do think some of the articles are fascinating that show like her popularity, like just how big, from just a fan base that she really is. And I'll be honest, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I kind of said, I don't remember the last time I saw anything like this in terms of her fan base. And I mean, if we really take a step back and like look at her fan base, it's true.
It is.
It's true. And I think the person that was with me, they said Michael Jackson, and I was like, you know what? I think they're right. Like that was the last time we saw anything of this magnitude. Michael Jackson was huge. Like, I mean, you love Michael Jackson, you hate Michael Jackson. His music was huge.
Yeah.
It was like nonstop on the radio. Like it's just everywhere. And so, I mean, and he was at it for a long time since he was like a little kid all the way until an adult. So, I mean.
Well, I worked in a small concert venue for a few years out of college. And the thing, when I see this stuff, this tour, I just think about the amount of security they're paying. I'm not even talking about the sound engineers, the people actually putting on the show, just the people who are standing around the stadium making sure that nobody like does something crazy or goes after her or anything. I mean, which by the way, security people are expensive. It's an expensive job or thing to pay. And so I just think of that alone. It's like gotta be just unbelievable. I mean, I can't even imagine like $20,000 worth of labor. I can't, I can't even imagine. It's just insane, and it is, this whole tour thing is incredible because it's just at such a huge level.
Yes.
And people don't understand that like this is in some of these towns, like this is the biggest money deal that's happened. The amount of money being transferred around for this is huge. I mean, it's just insane, but not to get into that, but it's
and thus we're going to end our podcast with Taylor time. Anyway,
Taylor time. Next week we'll do Taylor time, but we'll be like, well, what's going on with James Taylor right now?
What is going on with James Taylor right now?
I assume everybody's playing him, decorating for Christmas, because my parents always did. He's one of the few artists that there's certain artists out there that when I hear them, I start to smell cleaning supplies. Like I can smell Windex when I hear John Denver, because my parents always played John Denver when we were cleaning. So there's certain groups like that. He's one of them. But anyway, enough of that.
Yeah, enough of that. Enough of Taylor time for now. Anyway, I do believe that actually ends our show at a reasonable time.
Yeah, not bad.
There you go. Thanks, everybody, for listening and joining us this fine and wonderful day, evening, whatever it is for you. But anyway, everybody, God's blessings. See you soon. Bye.